Think about the last piece of content that you actually remembered when you were online. Not just something that you liked and scrolled past, but really remembered. What can you recall about that post? I bet it was a story.
Today, we're talking about why storytelling is one of the most powerful tools in your personal brand toolkit and how to start using yours on purpose. This is actually the second S in our 6S personal branding model. So if you've been following along, this one is really important. So let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Your brain is literally wired for story, and the science actually backs this up. This is some interesting facts that we've found, that stories are up to 22 times more memorable than facts alone, according to Stanford research.
Isn't that phenomenal? 22 times more memorable. This is what we're talking about. How can you be more memorable? And why does it even matter? Because that is your personal brand. How people remember you is your personal brand. And stories are the direct path to it.
Yeah, exactly. Most of us, we lead our personal brand with credentials, statistics, features, right? What are we selling? What are we doing? The services we offer. And that's exactly what is the most forgettable thing about us. Whereas when we tell a story, especially our favorite is your origin story. So that's your why. As Simon Sinek says, start with why. Your why story, why you do what you do, can be the most memorable story you ever tell, and exactly what helps to connect the people you are talking to with you, because there's something in that story that they might relate to.
And you know what's so cool about this? I just geek out on this stuff completely. Is that when we hear a story, something happens called neural coupling. And that is our brain actually syncing in with the storyteller's brain. Imagine at the unconscious level, two brains connecting. That's how we feel into the story. And I think it was Maya Angelou who said, we don't remember. People don't remember what you said. People don't remember what you did. People will always remember how you made them feel.
Because it's that connection, right? That emotional connection. I've got a story for you that exactly speaks to this point. On last week, Friday, we were up in the Royal Naval Dockyard to wait for King Charles' visit. He was visiting Bermuda, and my daughter was invited to sail with Endeavour, so she got the chance to meet the king. But of course, what happens when you're, going to meet the king, you've got to get there hours in advance. So I was up there hours in advance. My daughter was off with the sailing team, practicing and doing their thing. So I was just sitting up there with a couple of friends and sitting on a bench under a tent, just in the shade on a beautiful sunny day. And meanwhile, there's all the people milling around and waiting, as you do, and groups of school children started arriving. And one particular little boy came under the tent where we were sitting. It was a hot day, so everyone was looking for whatever shade you could find. And he came right up to me, put his hand on my leg, and said, "Brown bear, brown bear." Immediately, I went into, "What do you see?" "I see a red bird looking at me." And I couldn't even believe this child book that I used to read to my children almost every night when they were little came right back. My children are 17 and 13. You know how long it's been since I've read that book? But it was absolutely one of our favorites. And immediately we went into a green frog, a black sheep, a yellow goldfish. All the things just came right back in. And I was like, wow, here was this book that was this most beautifully illustrated book by Bill Martin Jr. and Eric Kyle. I even remember the authors and the illustrators. And it was just one of our favorites. It taught about colors and animals and rhyme and rhythm. And I used to be able to not even read the words, but, just page by page, I had it memorized. And it's been at least 11 years since I read that book, but it was right there at the tip of my memory. And that surprised even me at that moment. But absolutely, it was such a thing. And I remember the feeling of snuggling in bed with my little ones and, they'd be curled up next to me and listening to stories. And yeah, what a beautiful memory.
I love that you had that experience, and with a child stranger, like literally a stranger, if you can call a child a stranger, came up to you and triggered what a beautiful experience and what a beautiful memory. And what a beautiful story to share how memorable stories are.
It's that link to oxytocin too, right? Which is the trust and connection hormone. So it's that trust, that connection that comes right from a story. You know, this little boy felt safe to come to me and tell me a story. And then when I was able to just engage with him in that way that felt good to him, we have had an immediate connection. And can I tell you, he kept coming back and coming back. And the teacher was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if he's bothering you. And I was like, no, it's making my day. You know, my kids aren't little anymore. You know, I miss that. And it was a really cool experience and one I won't forget.
That is beautiful. So many layers to that. And I wonder how we get to be memorable as women in business, as founders. What stories help bring up that, like you said, trust and connection? Because basic marketing 101, know, like, trust. First, people need to know about you. Then they need to kind of like you, because we just don't do business with people we don't like. And ladies, that is not an invitation to be a people pleaser. Just trust that you're a
Yes, let's be
likable
clear on that.
character, because we're all pretty likable unless we're doing something that, is self-serving, or, yeah, we've all experienced that in business, right? So that's the know, that's the like, and then the trust is the thing that really takes a bit of effort to build, and quite often it takes a lot of time and a lot of time with people for them to learn to trust that the service you deliver is something that they want to exchange. It's a good value exchange. And yet, sharing a story, and what I love about the story you just shared, Laura, is there's an element of vulnerability to that. And that's what stories do. They allow us to be vulnerable in a way that feels safer than just blurting out the facts, and in a more relatable way that invites us to bring that person into our story so that they too can be vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly, it just like lights the candle for everyone. And that's a beautiful thing when we can be that light for others to feel safe, to be able to share and to be connected. That's fantastic. It does take a lot of time. When you're first starting out in business, the hardest thing is just making those first connections. It's getting brave enough to show up on camera or online or at a webinar or whatever. And it takes a lot of, bravery, courage, all the things, but the payoff is immense. And the more you get to do it, the more comfortable you kind of get with it and the better you get at it. And when we can tell really good stories, I've had to learn to be a little bit more succinct with my stories because I was not ever that good at being, keeping it tight because I like to tangent off on side quests all the time when I'm telling a story. And I think that's very normal. But when you can tell a story in a way that like people can remember because you've just captured that nugget and then the little moral of the story piece, that's magic. And the best storytellers are the ones you just want to keep getting more from. That's why authors get invited to be on stages a lot because they've spent the time to create the stories and put them in one place that people read and connect to. And then they get invited to be on those stages to share more of those stories. And that's how, things grow in your personal brand.
Yes, I love that. I have an example of a story that fits beautifully the description that you just said. And it's an old fable from many moons ago, a Sufi fable. And it's a story about truth and story. Quite fitting. So Truth walks into a village. Imagine Truth as a being. Truth walks into a village, naked. And as you could imagine, every door he had knocked on, it was turned away. Story came along to the village and dressed Truth in fine clothes. And suddenly, everyone welcomed them in. So that's what storytelling does for our message. It makes it accessible. And what I love about this story is that I'm that person who just wanted to blurt the truth out all the time. I started as a news reporter, right? We've shared that before. And it was always about, I was in search of the truth and I was going to share the truth and I was going to cut through the noise and share the truth. And friends, we now know that that's not how the news media works. I was an idealistic woman in my 20s. And yeah, the truth is hard to swallow. There's another expression. The truth is a hard pill to swallow. Well, what if you share it in a story? If you give a fable, if you give an example, if you invite people's curiosity, then you can share a similar message that is meaningful to you and memorable to others. Meaningful to you and memorable to others.
Meaningful and memorable. I love that. And if you really think about it, storytelling is how we've passed down knowledge and history for thousands of years. I mean, from the cave paintings to the campfires, oral tradition is just part of our culture and always has been for humans. It's just the way our brain is like magnetically wired to capture and remember important things. So if that's been instilled in us for all these thousands of years, then you have to understand it still is part of us now. We're not wired to remember statistics and numbers and figures as much as we are wired to remember the story wrapped around them. And that's what it's sometimes hard to remember because we don't spend a lot of time studying stories. We spend a lot of time studying facts and figures and research and going deep in on something that we're passionate about. But if we just shared that information, then people aren't going to remember that. Like I'm going to guess, even in this point of listening to this right now, do you remember the story I told, or do you remember the statistics we shared in the beginning about what percent or how much more times is a story remembered than a stat, right? What do you remember? I'd love to test your brain. Share it in the comments. Let us know.
I love that. That's such a great example and a test. It's such fun. So let's have a little think about the women that we work with and the women who are interested in developing their personal brand through more storytelling. The one thing we often hear is, well, my story is just not that interesting. Or I don't really have anything dramatic that's happened to me. So how do we help them?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good question. I don't think my story is particularly that interesting either. And I've told people my story in the past and they've been like shocked and oh my God, that's so, I'm thinking, oh, I didn't think it was that. But to them it was. And then that helped me understand, well, wait a minute, just because I think it's not that interesting doesn't mean others won't. We talk all the time about magnetic marketing. The key is you want to draw in the people that are for you, that are meant to be connected to you in some way as a, collaborator, as a partner, as a client, as a customer, whatever it might be. You want to attract the right ones and repel the rest. So if the story does repel somebody, then great, they weren't for you anyway. But if it attracts people, then they probably are the perfect ones for you. And you're going to make that connection so much faster. So telling your story, whether you think it's that interesting or not, it's still going to attract the right people for you. And I truly, in my heart, believe that making up stories is the worst thing you can do for your brand. Like if you make things up or over embellish or change things or try to create an alternate reality, when that gets discovered, brands completely, because one lie erases all trust. So it is really important to be real, authentic, and tell the truth in your stories. And when you do, you just continue to build trust. The opposite completely tanks it.
And why would we want to do that anyway? There's so many things that have happened in our lives, so many things that have happened in our business, so many things in the way that we think differently to other people. Why on earth would anybody choose to make something up, to make them more of something that they're not? The whole idea of a personal brand is authenticity. Show up as you are. Show a little bit more of you. Open up that part of you that maybe the world hasn't seen yet. And that's where you do become magnetic and memorable. And talking about memorable, if you're going to make something up, how hard is it to remember that and feel like you're sharing it authentically? And then you just feel like you're performing. And the whole idea of having a personal brand is that you don't need to perform. Just be you, show up as you are. There's no performative actions here. Nothing to remember. You feel it. You speak from the heart.
Oh, it's such a good point. This is something my grandmother used to say, and you've just brought it back to my memory, was that a liar has to have a good memory. Oh, it was such a powerful quote she used to say, and you've just brought it right back to me. Thank you, because it's so completely true. It just puts that exclamation mark on what you just said. Why do we want to remember things? We don't. You know, actors have to spend hours and hours and hours memorizing lines because they're not theirs, right? And they spend weeks memorizing a script, sometimes months, before they can perform it right. Okay, that's performance. That's intentional. But this, we're not talking about that. We're talking about just showing up as authentically you in lots of spaces where the people who need to find you can find you. It's really as simple as that. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be super polished. You don't even have to be like anything exceptional. Just be you, and the people who meant to find you are going to find you. And that's the message. Like, it's not that hard, but it's hard to start. But once you start, you can get your own sort of snowball rolling down the hill. And then who knows, you might even find it a little bit addictive, like I talked about in a previous episode.
Your story about storytelling and speaking being addictive is a brilliant one. And just in a nutshell, for those of you who haven't seen the other episode, you can go back and have a look. But ultimately, Alora was saying that she has recently been spending more time on stages, speaking unprepared in a way. I mean, life prepares you and your business prepares you. You know what you're talking about and you're talking from the heart. But you've been called on impromptu and you're kind of enjoying it. And this is what happens when we step into our truth, our greatness. We give ourselves permission to do the thing that feels scary. And once you do it, you might actually realize how much fun you have with it. I love that. I love that you are experiencing that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about 8-year-old me. No, sorry, eighth grade me. So that would be your last year of middle school. And I had to do a presentation on Egypt. And Egypt, I was passionate about since I was a little child. I was obsessed with the mummies and the King Tut and all the jewels and the art and the pyramids. And I was obsessed. And I got to pick a country, you know, and I was able to do this whole presentation. And then the teacher said, come to the front of the room and give the presentation. And I clearly remember the sound of the paper shaking in my hand as my voice was quivering and I was probably 3 shades of red. My stomach was knotted and I like raced through this speech as fast as I possibly could so I could go sit back down. That version of me would not believe the version of me that grabbed a mic and went on stage a few weeks ago without hesitation. Well, a little tiny hesitation, but still did it because those two people couldn't even understand each other today. But that's a beautiful thing. It's just been a series of practices, a series of saying yes to things that felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable at the time that led to being able to find a little familiarity and a little more comfort. And that's only going to grow the more I practice. Just like the more we practice anything, the better we get at it.
Yes, 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 yes. And so, ladies, if you think you don't have a story, I will challenge you to this. Think about one client that you've worked with who changed your view of how you think or changed your view of something in your work. Think about the time that things didn't go according to plan. You might like to call that failure. I just call it growth experience. Think about that and how you learned something so significant that you now do something differently. That's a story. Think about a conversation that you had with somebody, or a book you read, or a podcast you listened to that shifted your perspective. There's a story in that for you to share with your people, with your audiences. They're all stories. There are thousands of stories we have. And yes, we share formulas in the We Women Founders Circle, which is our beautiful community of female founders. We share models and methodologies and formulas to extract some really juicy stories. The hero's journey, for instance, the origin story, your signature story. So yeah, we do, and we practice it. And of course, We'd love to see you there. However, before we even invite you to the Real Women Founders Circle, you should also know that we do a free masterclass every month, and we talk about one of the 6 steps to personal branding. We have a model that we've created, 6 steps, all S's as it happens. Storytelling is the second one. And so join us. There's a link here somewhere that will connect you to the masterclass. It's completely free. We absolutely would love to have you join us, learn a little bit more about personal branding and a whole lot more about the 6S system. And who knows what stories might come from it.
Exactly. So if you're taking away just one thing that we've shared today, please remember this. Your expertise gets you in the room. Your story is what makes people remember you when you leave it. Thanks, partner.
And you.